Waiting for a fourth member, so we'll have a quorum and can start the meeting. Pretty sure they'll be signing on soon, so just give it a few minutes. All right, there we go. I think we can call this meeting to order. Welcome, everybody. I'll read our land acknowledgement statement. The City of Albany recognizes that I'm sorry, we need to have the roll call first, don't we? No, we'll do that, then I'll read our statement. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no problem. Committee Member Carlton?
Present.
Committee Member Green is absent. Committee Member Hanson Romero?
Present.
Committee Member Moss?
Here.
Committee Member Shrestha is absent, and Chair Abbott.
I'm here. Very good. All right. Now we'll read our land acknowledgement statement. The City of Albany recognizes that we occupy the land originally protected by the Confederated Villages of the Lejeune. We acknowledge the genocide that took place on these lands and must make strides to repay the moral debt that is owed to this indigenous people, specifically the Ohlone tribe. We thank them for their contributions, which have transformed our community and will continue to bring forth growth and unity. The City of Albany commits to sustaining ongoing relationships with the tribe and together build a better future for all that now make this their home. All right, thank you, everybody. And now we can approve the minutes. Anybody have a chance to look at the minutes and then make a motion?
I'll move approval of the minutes.
All right.
I'll second.
All right, let's have a vote. Moving too fast for you, huh, Brennan?
Sorry about that. Committee Member Carlton?
Approve.
Committee Member Hanson Romero?
Approve.
Committee Member Moss?
Yes.
And Chair Abbott.
And yes. All right, very good. Now we can open the floor to public comment. This is for items that are not on the agenda. If it's an item you want to speak on that's on the agenda, we'll get to that in the agenda. But if there's something else you'd like to talk about, a new item or something you'd like us to think about, please, now is the time. You can just raise your hand and we'll let you in and allow you to speak. And not seeing anybody's hand racing up, I think we can close public comment and open the floor for announcements. Brennan, do you have any city announcements?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that on Monday, July 4th, the City of Albany celebrated Independence Day with a concert in the park. Over 200 concert goers came out to Memorial Park to spend the afternoon listening to party band Groove Ride in a fun picnic-style setting. And we would like to thank the Albany Chamber of Commerce for providing free ice cream to the community during the event.
I can say with confidence you can boost your number to over 300 because we gave away 300 ice cream. So
okay, great.
There wasn't a lot of duplication.
I heard over 200. I heard over 500. I decided to go with the safe bet.
Yeah, well, consider 300 safe. Any other announcements, folks?
I just wanted to call out that Tuesday, August 2nd is National Night Out. So that's the National Block Party weekend. This is the first, I guess they kind of did it kind of softly last year, but it's been paused for a couple of years. So it's always the first Tuesday in August. So you can do a petition to the city to get your block blocked off and then do a block party with your neighbors. It's a good event.
Right. Yeah, no, it's a lot of fun. It's a good event. Building community. Did Member Hanson Romero have anything she wanted to announce?
I'm excited to announce we've got the Strollish Summer event coming which as you can see is Sunday, July 24th, 10 to 5. And then also we will be having the Solano Stroll as we knew it from 2019 coming back. So we're excited. That's the second Sunday in September. So Sunday, September 11th, please mark your calendars. We'll be closing off Solano Avenue, welcoming community members, artists, fans, everything out for that. But in addition, we will also be having another strollish the day before the actual stroll. So I know that's going to confuse a bunch of people. So we're just trying to make sure that we get the messaging out there right. So if you can help share that information with the community, that would be fantastic.
And one thing I would want to add to that announcement is that registration is now open. So if you're a member of a business or an organization that wishes to have a booth at the stroll, now is the time. And in fact, this year, the SAA will be giving away, I believe, 10 booths to nonprofit organizations. But the deadline to apply for that, I believe, is tomorrow. So if you're interested in your organization possibly getting a free booth, yeah, I think the Solano Avenue website would be the place to go.
And we want
Any
to
other announcements?
our sponsors for, allowing us to be able to have that opportunity to provide those spaces. So.
Any other announcements? Other members? Which I guess is Pete.
Yeah. Well,
all right. I think we can close announcements and move on. All right. We can move right on to item 6.1. This is the presentation on the potential ballot measure to update the business license tax. And I assume here you're just looking for feedback and to inform the commission.
That's correct. We're going to have Heather Rowden do the presentation. I'm not seeing her yet, so I'm going to see if I can. I see Justin Fried and Jeff Bond here to see if we could move to item 6-2, and I'll try and get a hold of Heather to see if she can join us for this presentation, if that's okay with you.
That should be fine.
Great. So Justin and Jeff, I'm going to promote you to panelists. I apologize if I'm catching you off guard.
So we're moving to item 6.2, the long-term parklet program, and this is, I think, the third time we've seen this. We made it almost over the finish line last time, but we weren't quite comfortable approving something with, we hadn't seen with the changes. So now it's back with the changes, and I think we can ask Justin and Jeff to take it away.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, thanks for having us back to present the revised draft guidelines to you tonight. Let me share my screen real quick. So we began discussing this through the late winter and have been presenting guidelines and revising them since May. The revised guidelines that have been provided to you tonight include a new section on materials, along with a few edits to other sections based on your feedback last month, which I'll run through briefly. In the parklet location and setbacks section, we are calling out applications for 3 angled parking spaces. We had discretion to go from between 2 and 3, and we're saying that if someone is applying for 3 spaces, they would be subject to review in front of the Planning and Zoning Commission. We are also specifying within the perimeter barriers section a little more detail on those requirements, specifying a maximum gap in the railings, as well as the sort of robust sturdiness of being able to withstand 250 pounds of force, to give a scale of the intent of someone not inadvertently sort of pushing them over, spilling out into the street unsafely. In the materials section, this is the new section. We revisited guidelines from other cities, parklet programs, and the Albany's residential design guidelines following last month's discussion to draft additional guidance on materials and a design review process per your direction. The section currently states that acceptable perimeter barrier materials include metal, wood, or other natural material. to provide additional design guidance for applicants. The guidelines could provide a list of pre-approved materials for the various design elements by element, like platform or barrier, canopy, or samples of what is and is not considered appropriate. The residential design guidelines had more of a, these are the kinds of things we like. These are some good examples. If the committee has feedback on the language provided in the guidelines or how best to communicate the design intent expressed by the committee to potential applicants, we would welcome that feedback. And if the committee does recommend design review by the Planning and Zoning Commission, we'll take this to them and can solicit their input on this as well. We also folded the plant material, lighting, and building code discussion items from the last month into this section because it seemed appropriate once we started talking about materials and design in this section. And the one other main change was in the signage section. It specifies now that signage is prohibited on the parklet structures, so not precluding the instructional signage that was discussed as being potentially caught up in the larger prohibition. So with that, we're seeking this committee's recommendation, and if the recommendation does include this new role for Planning and Zoning Commission, in the review process, we'll bring the program guidelines to that commission for their discussion and recommendation as well. And once we have advisory body recommendations, we'll bring this to City Council for their approval and develop the final application and guidance documents. And with that, I'll open it up for questions and discussion.
All right, members of the committee, if you have any clarifying questions, something you'd like a little more information on before we go to public comment, now is your time. Member Hanson Romero.
I just wanted to see if there was any updates on the whole, the Barney's structure and the way that it's angled there. Has there been any resolution to that?
Not yet. We're still having conversations with them, and reached out to Berkeley's economic development department. And so we're just trying to continue the discussion to try and find some resolution. But yeah, it's still a work in progress.
Okay, thank you for that update.
And Member Moss, I think I saw your hand.
You did. Well, a real quick question. I'm curious as to how you're going to test for 250 pounds ability to, stop whatever is 250 pounds. A large cyclist, I suppose. Does that involve engineering, or just that's just some kind of off the top of your head estimate of what you're gonna look for?
I was pulling from peer requirements. We have not devised what the intention here is to develop the design intent so that designers know what they should be designing for. We have not formalized how we would do a spot check of that.
Yeah, it was completely confusing to me as how someone would figure that out on the spot. But I have some comments, but I think that's really sort of the only question I have at this point.
Member Carlton, any questions or nothing?
Actually, I did have a question on the signage, and I know that we talked about this last time, and part of it was to not have, I think it was just kind of keep it all in check. But then are we saying that so businesses can't, on the side of your structure, you couldn't print your business name at all? Or how far does the signage prohibition go?
That is what would be prohibited as it's currently written. Yeah.
I think it does mention branded umbrellas being accepted. Is that right? I think I saw that somewhere. Maybe not quite in that section, but
that was in the earlier version when it was blanket, no signage, because when you buy an umbrella often, or cafe umbrellas often have that kind of thing. With the switch to it being on the structure, that one we didn't think needed to be called out.
It fits in anyway. Yeah.
Okay.
The question I had is whether there is because it's a permit process, whether there's a built-in appeal period. Like do they have 15 days after the permit is is initially granted for somebody to appeal? Or is it just once it's granted here?
That's not something we spelled out in the guidelines. That is something we could think more about. Now that if the recommendation is to have planning and zoning as a sort of design review body for this, we could build in a staff decision appealable to them, or a appeal of their decision, kind of as is done with, I think, other permits.
Okay, thank you.
I could add to that. I think right now in the planning and zoning code, there's a 14-day appeal period, but there is a application fee that has to be paid for that appeal. So we might want to think through modifying that appeal process to this particular kind of application, which might be a little different.
So if somebody submitted an application, it was granted, and then somebody wanted to appeal that, there's a fee associated with, which presumably is to cover staff time for processing the appeal. I completely understand that. But that's what you're saying, is the person appealing would be paying a fee.
That's right.
Okay, great. Thank you. Member Hans-Romero?
I just had a generalized question as far as with that appeal process. I mean, I feel like I see a lot of other cities and everything put up a proposed notice of what's going to happen in a specific location, and be able to get feedback prior to anything being finalized or approved. But I don't seem to see a lot of that proposed notification in Albany, and I was wondering if this could be something that maybe might help us get in front of something where we have a conflicting situation with businesses, the neighboring businesses.
I think, our practice is to send written notices to property owners and to occupants of property owners. So in this case, businesses. We typically don't do the signage postings that you see in other cities. It's been my experience that just turns into blight more than anything else in a lot of places, those signs, and there's often not a good place to put them. So we'd have to think through about how to post those kinds of notices if that was the ultimate desire. I think our intent here would be to continue the same practice, which is to send a postcard to everybody within a certain radius. And we could also, again, with planning and zoning, we try to hit the neighborhood that it's affecting as well through the e-notify system that the city has. I mean, perhaps we could add the economic development e-notify list to any outdoor dining related application. I'm open to your ideas about how to do that.
Yeah, I think I would like to see it, because I'm hearing in the community on several different projects and stuff like that they still feel like they're not really notified very well. And perhaps sometimes it affects people that may not have seen the notices or didn't realize the full intent. I feel like, if other cities feel like it's a best practice to do those, big poster size notices of where something is going to be positioned, it helps people get a better understanding. Oh yeah, something's really going to happen here, and I need to be aware because I see this all the time, or something along those lines. I think
so. I think we're getting into discussion here, so let me just ask one more quick question. Jeff, thank you. You were just spelling out the notification that the city generally goes through. Would that apply here only if we roll in planning and zoning as some sort of design review or a request of planning and zoning, or is that kind of the plan for anything that's going to be made permanent?
We could do it either way.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, any other questions? Open up for public comment. Not seeing any. All right, we will look for some hands from the folks who would like to have some say on this agenda. Not seeing any hands. Going once, going twice. All right, pulling it back to the committee, sorry, for discussion. So I believe Member Hansford-Mayo may have a request about notification.
Yes. So I just feel like I know the postcards and putting stuff out there is one thing, but I just feel like a more visible piece of something that people are used to seeing in other cities that may draw more attention and help us get in front of things better than trying to go back after people finally realize what's happening.
I would suggest I think perhaps you're raising a larger point that you'd like to direct a planning and zoning process in general. I think perhaps for this, we might ask for something like that because here there is an obvious place to place them, which is on the existing parklets that are going to be made permanent. But that's kind of this step only, wouldn't be in the future. So I don't know if we need to go request something like that. What do the other committee members think? Member Mosh, yes.
Yeah, as far as this goes, we do have other practices that we do. Story polls, something like that. Perhaps, if the issue for other businesses is going to be lack of parking, which I suspect is usually the issue, just putting some cones out there to show that, yes, these parking places are going to be taken would be giving the people a heads up that something's afoot on a couple of parking places. I'm a little confused because this is supposed to be a 3-year program. And so I know Todd's saying permanent, and I personally hope they are permanent, that we continue this whole idea of parklets and taking that kind of space away from the street. But the other hand, I believe this is for 3 years. So
it's 3 years.
So permanent,
3 years at a time. 3 years at a time. The permit's for 3 years, but then it can be renewed and on and on. Yeah. So.
Yeah. So, but it's not like when you build a second story in your house,
Yeah.
you don't have to renew the permits for that, which is a different situation. And sort of my guess is that as over the next 3 years, we're going to learn a lot about what works and may not work on parklets. We're going to have a better sense of how it affects parking, et cetera, et cetera. And also, to the point that I was, on last meeting, this idea of design, there was some changes in the what was sent to us that were in the right step, but I was personally hoping for even a little bit more kind of design guidelines, and just putting out the design guidelines for homes is helpful. I mean, it gives you a sense of what the community thought in 2018, but we may want to, by the end of the first 3 years, we may want to have some more definitive standards about lighting or maybe certain kinds of signage. I mean, why somebody couldn't spell out on lights something that just says, good dining or peace or whatever, which was not a commercial, but, had some kind of visual interest, to the street. In any case, I think this is kind of a bit of an experiment here that we're doing, and that all cities are doing with these parklets, on this level, and that we'll get a lot out of it. And maybe we'll be revising this in 3 years as to, well, this is a parklet that works really well, and this one maybe not so well. And I think right now, to my mind, there are parklets on Solano that I think are great, and there's others that I think are a waste of space, just on the visuals of them and what they're actually doing for the restaurants, not to name names. But that's sort of my 2 cents at the moment. Since I have the floor, I'll continue. then, one of the last items on our agenda tonight is on the Creative Justice Art Project. I'm still trying to figure out what creative justice is, but in any case, why this isn't kind of put into the whole idea of parklets as another place for art is a question in my mind. I mean, we're pushing out into the street. They're very visible. There should be some art there. There should be something that's visually interesting. But again, this is kind of late in the process of forming all these ideas. So I'm good personally of voting yes on this tonight. And then hopefully when this comes back in a few years, we'll have some better ideas about how this could evolve.
Good point. Good point. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Any response? I'm sorry. Other members, please. Yes, Member Carlton.
I just wanted to agree that what Member Moss said. I think that this is kind of a work in progress. I mean, right now, when a lot of the parklets came just out of necessity, and it's like, let's just put these out here so these businesses can stay around. And now, as we evolve to a more, permanent type of solution, I think you're right. I think it's going to evolve as a couple more years go on and be like, wow, it would be great if you could put some signage out there or some lights or, a mural to make it more visibly attractive, or, some of the 250 pound, resist or, limit wasn't enough or is too much or whatever. But I think that you're right. I kind of feel like it's time to kind of move this one forward.
And I just imagine, a burly fireman going out there and throwing himself against to see what happens. That's kind of what I'm seeing. That's our high-tech solution.
Well, maybe that could be a ticketed event. Everybody go pay money and go watch this happen.
Triple fireman. All right. Member Hancher Romero, any comments? Okay. So I just first off, I forgot to do this last time. I just wanted to say I was very happy with the updates that were made. I really feel like you heard what we had to say here and addressed them very well. And so I really appreciate that effort from staff. One tiny little thing I noticed is in the perimeter barriers section, second paragraph, you mentioned water-filled K rails, and that's fine. But then in the materials, you say natural materials. I'm not sure a water-filled K rail is natural material. So maybe just pull that out. And that would be a situation where planning and zoning could say yay or nay, if that's what they want to do, just because it's a little contradictory there. I think that I would, one thing, if we're planning to look at this in 3 years, do we want to make that part of the program that will be reviewed every 3 years? The program guidelines reviewed. I know that, for instance, the Parks and Rec Commission, we review the tree removal application process every 2 years. Well, we could make it, kind of to coincide with the expiration of that. And that would just be a line at the end, to be reviewed. And we might even want to say, just do it the first time and then as needed something, because we're sure we're going to want to look at it in 3 years. Maybe we don't need to say anything. What about, and I'm not sure whether this would need to be part of the guideline or just be something that, planning and zoning would develop, but just, a sheet with 2 or 3 pictures or 2 or 3 example parklets. This is kind of what we're looking for. I was really kind of inspired by the photos in the attached residential stand, just to give people a frame of reference. It doesn't have to be, it has to look like this. It can't look like that. Just, we want something that looks nice is basically what you want there, maybe with some plants. The only other comment I would make is that I do like the idea of including some sort of, kind of standard notification. Although I would say as a general point, I'm not sure postcards are as effective now as they used to be. It happened. I mean, you've seen this, all the people just aren't even looking at their mail anymore. So I'm not sure what the solution is, and that's not really for this committee to deal with. But I know that when they're doing a tree removal, there's a piece of paper attached to the tree, and it says, here's the date of the review. I, again, I know that when they're doing a tree removal, there's a piece of paper attached to the tree, and it says, here's the date of the review. I, again, I know that when they're doing a tree removal, there's a piece of paper attached to the tree, and it says, here's the date of the review. So maybe at least for these ones that are being, kind of granted approval after they're already there, a sheet saying proposed for 3-year permit or something like that. Just again, we're Member Hans Romero and I are both working from this one example of a commercial business person who is really upset when she learned that this parklet that she had just kind of consigned herself to tolerate during the pandemic was going to likely be made long term because it's really affecting her business. And I'm not sure she would have discovered that if I think Member Hans Romero had mentioned it to her. So I think it's pretty important that we give people the opportunity to voice their concerns, and they need to know what's happening to do that. So I think notification would be important there. But other than that, like I say, I very much appreciate the work staff has done on this, and I think we did a great job responding to our requests. Any other discussion? Any comments? I'm not sure I made anything clear. Yeah, Jeff.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Abbott. I want to touch on the notification because I'm not, two things. I'm not clear exactly what your expectation is. And I do have to say, I do have concerns about physically posting the ability to, I mean, we can certainly figure something out. We're not going to be able to find a good place to do it for every single application. And we can't go back every day to ensure that it's being maintained. So if it's vandalized or just whatever happens, I don't think anybody considers those signs a best practice in the planning profession. A lot of cities do it because it's in their municipal code and they just kind of, there's a certain practice. But I am concerned that, we can try to do it. I'm concerned that if that holds up, if some damage to that vandalism of that posted sign means that we can't move forward with the application, that can have that could really slow down the process for somebody.
Yeah.
I would, the postcards, frankly, I think we get pretty good participation from our postcards in this city. We had an application on the Solano Avenue a few weeks ago that had 200 pieces of mail that came in on it. So, however that happens, it seems to happen pretty well. If it's a matter of reaching out to the individual businesses, I'd almost rather to do that rather than to have a physical sign posted. It's going to slow down the process. It's going to make a little bit more of a hassle for everybody. And I frankly don't know that we can maintain that sign for the 14 days or 10 days or whatever number of days you want. So I do have concerns about that practice. If that's your direction, we'll do our best, but I'm not sure that's going to be something that everybody's going to be really happy with in the long run.
All right. I appreciate those comments. Member Hans Romero, Member Moss.
Sorry. My idea of the posting the notice would be inside the front window of the business that's planning on having that. So it wouldn't necessarily be something that you'd have to worry about being kept up or vandalized, because it'd be like a change of business kind of notification. The other reason that because the mailings in this particular situation, and this holds true for several businesses, several blocks on Solano, is that, and in this particular instance, is that the business is a Berkeley business, but the street and the sidewalk is an Albany business. So it caused a lot of confusion from that Berkeley business, thinking that Berkeley was the one who had actually approved and installed or approved to permit this, when in fact it was actually the city of Albany. So if the city of Albany is putting out notifications, they most likely wouldn't put those notifications out to the Berkeley business. So that's my point here, is where I'm trying to go with this.
I appreciate the clarification. I think it is, posting something inside the business is somewhat akin to Member Moss's comment about a story pole. I mean, we could we can get an application, we can have that business post that image of what it's going to be in their window or their door, whatever. We do incidentally send notices to, whatever radius you give us, we send it, whether it's in the city of Berkeley or city of Albany. We don't stop at the city limit line for our notices.
Mhm.
But I like your idea. I appreciate your idea of posting that. I think that would be a good solution and one that would hopefully be effective. I mean, we just want it to be effective. So thank you for that.
Very good. Member Moss, I think I saw your hand.
You did. Jennifer pretty much said exactly what I was going to propose. Just something that was even on the inside of the window of the restaurant that wanted to do the parklet, announcing this was their proposed idea, and maybe a little drawing or sketch would be a pretty easy way to do that. It did bring up a question I had wondered about a while back. Given that there are a number of places where these parklets could come that were on Albany side of the sidewalk street for a business that was in Berkeley, are we getting any tax revenue off of that since the business is going to be conducted in Albany? And, some people won't even step into the Berkeley store or restaurant. Has anyone questioned? That's probably a question for Heather, but it does seem to me a little unfair that Albany's not getting in on this.
It's a good point, and that unfairness continues on with, like, we take care of their sewer lines and all sorts of things. It's an awkward arrangement. We wouldn't have done it this way.
Okay.
The line was drawn that way 115 years ago or whatever it was. So.
Right.
And Albany may not exist if it hadn't been drawn that way. So there we are. Right. So let me ask, do you think you've gotten what you would like? I mean, do you think would the committee be comfortable voting and passing this with what we've given them with an understanding they would update this a little bit? Are we comfortable with that tonight? Because that's kind of what we need to do. Mm-hmm. All right. So maybe Justin, could you just kind of tell us what you would change from our comments, or is that just so we're clear? We'll roll this into the motion when we go ahead.
Sure. I've got interesting clarification of appeal process and how that would work for these applications, as well as requiring posted notice within the restaurant applying of the intended parklet, as well as our postcard notice in advance of staff decision or planning a zoning commission discussion of the item. And then the other was defer to planning and zoning discussion on this, but looking at building more of a what we want palette of examples as we proceed along. Those were my main. Anything else I missed?
Do you need any more clarification, like a 14-day notification or 10-day notification, or is that kind of just a standard thing you do?
If you have specifics, otherwise we would probably look to our standard for other similar applications.
I don't feel strongly. I'm sure that's adequate. Yeah. Member Hensler.
Oh, I was just going to say the renewal process of when we were going to review going forward. I think that was an item that needed to get added as well.
Bringing back the potential revisions to the guidelines before a new cycle of permit renewal. Got it.
I mean, can we just hold that as a new agenda item for the committee for 3 years, or do we need to just make a note of it here? Brennan, any suggestions or ideas on that?
Sorry, could you repeat that one?
So we're talking about reviewing the program in 3 years and potentially every 3 years. Do we just want to save that as a future agenda item, or should we go ahead and make note of it in the program itself?
I think probably saving it for a future agenda item makes sense. I mean, because it has the timeline on it.
Yeah. Okay. All right. And I think it would kind of come up naturally anyway, but sure. Okay. I think that's fine. All right. I think we're set. If you folks like that, let's get a motion going.
Do we need a motion passed on this? I mean, the agenda item just says we're going to be given a presentation, but
Well, this is the one that we have to approve to recommend to council. So
Okay.
we need to approve this to recommend to council. Oh, you're right, it does say that. But yeah, I think I mean, do we need to officially approve this? Is that correct?
Would be ideal.
Yeah, okay, so let's go ahead. Yeah.
I'll move approval of the agenda item.
I'll second.
Okay.
Okay.
That would-
Committee Member Carlton,
Approve.
Committee Member Hanson Romero,
Approve.
Committee Member Moss,
Yes.
and Chair Abbott.
Yes. All right. Thank you, everybody. Move on right along. And thanks again, staff. Very much appreciated, Justin and Jeff both. I know you put a lot of work on this.
And Brennan as well.
And Brennan as well. All right. Well, thank you, Brennan. Excellent.
Yeah.
So,
sorry, just one moment. I'm doing some staff switches here.
I see that Heather has joined us. So yeah.
Heather has joined us, yes.
Ms. Roden.
Okay. I'm going to bring Heather on now. There we go.
All right, this is item 6.1. We'll be talking about receiving a presentation on the potential ballot measure to update business license tax. This is an opportunity for the committee and members of the public to provide feedback on this before it goes to a ballot item. The council to approve for ballot items. So I believe we have a presentation.
Yes, and I apologize for my tardiness, but yeah, so the council is thinking about putting a tax measure on the ballot that would restructure the business license taxes. Currently, the tax is based per employee, and the proposal is to change that to a tax on gross receipts. And in addition, they're looking to increase the amount of revenue that is brought in. Now, this is a little bit difficult to say exactly how it will affect individual businesses, because there are quite a few unknowns in this. We made a lot of assumptions with the consultant NBS when we did all of our when we did the modeling for the tax. But I did in my presentation to council and the memo that I provided to you guys, I gave an estimate of what it would cost for the average restaurant that I have data for and the average healthcare services agency that we have data for. So the proposal, the average restaurant has $55,000 in gross receipts. With the current structure, they pay, I also pulled up what the average restaurant is currently reporting as their full-time equivalent employees. So if you have 2 part-time employees, that equals 1 full-time equivalent. And so you can see at the bottom of the page that Brendan is showing, thank you, that the average restaurant is reporting 3.38 full-time equivalent employees, and they pay $560.84 based on the 2022 rates. With the new rate structure, they'd be paying $80. We specifically, when we proposed this rate structure, we increased the sort of like a low gross receipts exemption. The current lower rate is only set at $600 of gross receipts. That's where you get your break, is if you only make $7,600 a year. So we've clearly increased that. to 50,000, which is a little bit more. And then moving on to the next example, healthcare services, they're currently reporting approximately one additional full-time equivalent employee, which is a rate structure of $399, but they clearly make a lot more in gross receipts. And so the new rate structure increases their tax to $525. 4 different rate structures were proposed to council. At the time, the one that is in this memo is the one that they selected to move forward and bring to the Economic Development Committee for review. So that is really my presentation.
All right, we can bring it back to the committee for questions. Any clarifying questions before we move to public comment and discussion? Yes, a member.
I guess the first question for me is, you're saying that the average restaurant has gross receipts of 55,000 and they have 3.38 full-time employees, and they obviously have to pay rent.
So
how's that work?
So that very much is an average. You have some that are reporting, like, so for example, we'll take the man that sells ice cream on the corner, right? He's not making a lot of money, but he's still reporting sales tax data. So he would be reported under restaurants, which is prepared food. But at the same time, you have much larger restaurants, and we're just averaging everything. So the average is 55,000 in gross receipts. Now, I only had taxable data, and we assumed that restaurants were reporting 80% taxable with 20% exempt sales. So we made assumptions on their exempt sales in order to come up with that $55,000. They could have more exempt sales. There's nowhere that just has gross receipts data readily available for cities. So we made a number of assumptions based on data that we did have and industry standards.
Okay. I'm still having a hard time putting all this assumptions together, because, any place on Solano Avenue that's, if the average is 55,000, that means there are some places that are making a whole lot less and some that are doing much better. And how anyone pays rent and also pays employees is there's a lot of assumptions there. So I'm a little troubled by all this in terms of, you're going to go forward with a tax plan that I'm not sure where how these assumptions are being made. It doesn't, I'm not in the restaurant business. I didn't have a business on Solano Avenue, but I know a little bit about business, and some of those numbers just don't add up in my mind. But that starts to get into comments, so I'll let other questions be asked here.
Appreciate that. Member Carlton?
What constitutes exempt versus non-exempt sales?
So that's specifically for sales tax purposes. And that is a loaded question. Sales tax law is not simple. It could be a sale to a non-exempt agency. It could be a sale of a product that is non-exempt. So for example, if you have a restaurant that also sells, frozen meals, that is not a prepared food, but it is a grocery staple, which is not taxable.
Got it.
So that is what I meant when I said exempt sales.
Okay. Thank you.
Member Hans-Romero, any questions?
Well, I'm kind of with Pete here. I'm seems like a lot of assumptions, and I'm really trying to wrap my head around how this is going to affect different businesses. I know that we were all sent a message by one business who felt very strongly that this was really going to impact his business pretty severely. It was not a restaurant business, but I feel like we need to maybe get some case studies. Maybe case studies might be the way to go to see and specifically drill down to different types of businesses and how it would affect them, whether negative or, how bad of an impact this might be for a business. So that's kind of my concern.
Okay. All right. Not seeing any more questions. I think we can open it for public comment. If there's anybody attending at home or wherever, feel free to raise your hand and have your voice heard here. And I am not seeing anybody. 1, 2, 3, and we are bringing it back for discussion. All right. Yeah, I mean, I would just voice that if one of the goals is to allow these lower margin businesses, such as a restaurant, a restaurant makes 4 or 5% profit. A retail store will make under 10% profit, versus a services company that can make 50% profit on their gross. If the goal is to kind of even that out, or try to, we feel that restaurants which are labor heavy are being penalized for having so many employees. I think we need a more accurate example. This is not an accurate example. I think that rather than taking an average, which I'm sure this is an accurate average, and we know that the data is compromised because all you have is kind of indirect evidence via sales tax. But this doesn't pass the sniff test, and so I worry that it gives a incorrect kind of picture of what we're talking about. It may be that a restaurant with more than 3 employees is going to be paying more than $560 a year based on the gross profit. We don't know. So that's just kind of as far as the basis. I would rather see this not here at all than to have this, what I feel is misleading data in the memo. Any other discussion? That's just wanted to say. Sure, Member Moss.
This is sort of a question too. I mean, you're going to base this whole system on gross receipts. And as Todd just mentioned, between a service company versus a restaurant or a grocery store, the profit margins are completely different. Although the gross receipts might be big in some, say, a restaurant, but if their profit margin is much smaller, isn't that a penalty against the restaurant for this big gross receipt amount versus a service that their gross receipts might be less, but their profits are much higher? Because if they're just doing some kind of consulting, say, that could be a very high profit margin compared to what they're as a percentage of what they're charging. So if the whole idea of this in part was for more kind of a economic equity for different businesses, it seems like gross receipts is not going to do that.
Or perhaps with some, 2 or 3 variations, services, retail, restaurants, something like that. I don't think it needs to be too fine-grained, but what would you think of something like that to try to take account of the different profit margins? Yeah,
in the very least. But also, I don't know what, I didn't pay attention. I don't know what was presented to council in terms of why they took this as opposed to some other system. But it's all going to come down, if it's either, whether it's gross receipts or profit margin or anything else, it's all going to come down to the treasurer having to look at tax returns, which seems like a huge increase in work. So does the finance department of the city of Albany have the capability to look at all the tax returns you're going to have to be looking at over a given year?
So we wouldn't have to unless we audited. This would be what people are reporting, similar to sales tax or income taxes or anything. Like if you send your tax return to the IRS and you put a number on that line, and there's no backup for that unless they come and audit you. It's the same with our current business license structure, where you say you have 2 employees. Unless I go and I, physically go through your timesheets, I don't know how many employees you have. It's a, it's a reporting thing. It would be much harder administratively for us to do a different rate structure for different types of businesses. That was one of the things that we thought about when we proposed one rate structure. Other cities do have different rate structures for different types of business, or different rates for different types of businesses. But generally, when they have different rates for different types of businesses, they don't have a tiered approach. It's just one rate regardless of your gross receipts.
And that starts getting in towards what we're doing now. We have some different classifications, but it's based on number of employees. So it would just kind of be a little shift there, I guess. Gross receipts rather than number of employees. Member Carlton?
Yeah, sorry, I may have missed this, but what is driving the whole change? Is it just because this hasn't been revised for a while, or what's the whole point?
Yes, partly that it hasn't been revised for 60 some odd years. And then also because this was driven partly by staff, and it is also on the economic development strategic plan to switch to a gross receipts model. But the idea of taxing by employee basically penalizes businesses for hiring people. Whereas with gross receipts, again, it's that more, in theory, economically equitable on a basic level.
Yeah, understood. Yeah, I mean, you're with tax employees, you're penalizing labor-heavy businesses. Yeah. And with gross receipts, you're I don't know if you want to use the word penalizing, but it's going to hit harder to low margin businesses. But it doesn't discourage hiring, so that's key. That's important. That's good. That's valuable. All right. And I think the other thing, just as a general point that I kind of gathered from this, is part of the idea was that when this was passed, it didn't have to be approved by the voters. This will need to be approved by the voters. So there's another level of integrity, or whatever you want to say, with the revision.
That is accurate. And the current law is honestly just confusing. People are very confused when they look at the rate schedule, when they look at the law. It is not easy.
I got confused looking at it to prepare. I mean, just like, what? I pay this every year and I don't know. Okay, now I'm going to be audited. All right. Other discussion on this? Yeah. Any suggestions or something that's useful that they can take? Member Moss, I think, and then I think Member Moss start.
Okay. Thanks. I had one question. Was the old law was also non-transferable, or did those that non-transferability of a business license increase under these new this new proposal, or is it the same? I was a little confused looking at that section.
I think they just changed the wording. You've never been able to transfer a business license. So, for example, if you sell your business and it has a new EIN and all of that, the new owner has to get a new business license. They don't carry over. If you purchase a business and you're purchasing like the EIN and you're purchasing, the entity, then the business license stays with the entity, but you can't transfer a business license from one entity to another.
Oh, okay. Well, I agree that our old system was confusing, and this idea of basing it on employees, I think, was terrible. I think this might be better, is for my 2 cents, but I think it could be a whole lot better. Although to make it a whole lot more equitable would require probably more staffing, and looking more thoroughly at tax returns, which is really, the most accurate way you could be doing something like this. And if some of what's driving this by staff is also increasing revenue, it's a little bit off, but I had proposed while I was on council, we should be allowing cannabis sales in the city. The revenue increase would be far more than 300,000, I suspect. But that's a whole different course of action here, which we shouldn't be considering tonight, I suppose.
So I will say that one of the reasons that the proposed increase is so small is there are a lot of unknowns. We don't necessarily know. We have no data, like no hard data on businesses that don't report sales tax. So all those professional services, these were industry averages that NBS as a consultant knew of from different sources. So these are all estimates. And that was, again, one of the reasons why we didn't go in immediately and say, let's assume we're going to make, twice as much money, because we don't want to all of a sudden be taxing people way too much or bring in, 3 times more revenue than we were anticipating. We tried to, make it reasonable.
How many businesses are there in Albany that you issue licenses to?
Including rentals, like apartment rentals, we issue just over 2,000 business licenses a year.
2,000. And if you were to look at 2,000 federal tax records per year, how much more staff would that take?
I don't. Off the top of my head, and I obviously would need to do a lot more thinking about this, but probably 2.
Two more people.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I don't see how you do this on gross receipts and be particularly equitable, but that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, no, I'm kind of, I actually like the change. I like what we're planning here. I think that it takes a pretty even hand. But I do, but when I noticed the 55,000 really jumped at me, and I started really digging in and thinking about it and realizing how, the difference between, it's going to be, 1/40th of one business's income and 1/500th of another business income. And is that fair? I don't know. Of their profit. Is that fair? I don't know. But again, I don't think there is a perfect solution to this. Any others? I think what we need is to provide some suggestions now, right? Just keep saying we don't like it. Member Hans-Romero?
I guess my suggestion would be to maybe have a business community discussion perhaps about this, maybe have some informational sessions saying what the proposed changes and why, I don't know if there could be like a, specific, what am I trying to say? Like a Zoom meeting or something that businesses could be notified that they could come on and ask questions and give examples on how it might affect their business, and just be able to get some more better understanding and ideas of how it might impact them.
Or maybe even just a poll where they would go in and they could calculate their own, amount. They wouldn't necessarily submit that, but then provide feedback. It would be, this is what it is now, this is what it'd be then. What do you think? Something like that.
One caveat to this is that a decision has to be made tonight in order to go to council, in order to have it at the.
Yeah, I was going to ask if there's a deadline. Yeah. Okay, very good. I did like, I'm sorry, Member Carlton.
Oh, I was just going to say that I actually think that it makes more sense to go off of gross receipts, because you don't want to hurt the businesses who have a number of employees, because, people hired does help all of Albany. But I'm going back and echoing earlier comments that I just don't feel like the numbers kind of add up on this. So I don't know. I guess it feels like there's a lot of assumptions that were made. So I guess that's where I think I'm struggling, and maybe everybody else is kind of struggling. So like you said, you don't know, but then asking us to move forward on something that is based on a lot of assumptions is kind of hard to make a recommendation to.
It's called leadership. We have to take a jump.
Yeah.
And I don't think we're actually proving this. We're just providing comment, is my understanding. Is that correct? Or are we also supposed to recommend it to council like we did the last? Brennan?
I mean, I think if a recommendation is ideal, but then of course, if you're not wanting to recommend it, then that doesn't happen.
Fair enough.
So.
Fair enough. Yeah, fair enough. Okay.
I mean, at the very least, I think you're right. At the very least, comments would be ideal. And then.
So I would like, if possible, say, I don't know, maybe Member Moss would have some input on what, sort of overhead a contractor deals with, materials and labor and what overhead. What sort of profit margin? Maybe you don't want to reveal that.
Well, I'm certainly long retired, but I do know that a contractor can have $1 million going through his account in a given year and be making under 100,000, depending upon what materials are going out there, et cetera. So this would not be particularly fair to that industry. I used to be able to, long ago, put everything on the United Charge card, and we would take wonderful, vacations all over on United airplanes. But, that said, yeah, I mean, that's exactly what struck me was that, there are some businesses that just have high amounts of money passing through their account, but there's not much of it gets to stay in the account at the end of the day. So, while this is a great improvement over business licenses based on employees, which might have made sense back in the day where you didn't want people coming into town to work, in the stores, very different Albany, but it's not the kind of equity, that I would hope to see, going forward. And then, like I say, something based more on profit margins than gross receipts would make a lot more sense. Yeah, it's more confusing. It's more challenging for the city, but, if you could figure out a way to do something like that, I think it would be, in that equity realm, a whole lot better.
So just one comment, you're getting dangerously close to suggesting that we have an income tax, which I do not think that we can.
Well, no,
so,
but this is business license fees, it's not an income tax. I mean,
it is a tax though. And once you start saying we're going to, not do gross receipts, we're going to exclude certain expenses, you have to determine what expenses are you going to include, or is it just cost of goods sold, or is it salaries? Is it, all of those things? And you're just starting to go into an income tax, which I don't think cities can apply. So.
Okay. Well, I mean, that you're dealing in some fine issues, which, I can't say I understand. But if this was based on some number that came out of federal taxes, again, I don't know. I don't have a great solution here. I'm just saying that you've dealt with one inequity about the way we were collecting business taxes, and I think you're sort of setting up a different inequity. So is that an improvement? I don't know.
I just want to jump in and clarify. Oh, sorry. Just wanted to clarify based on a previous thing I stated. So no recommendation is required for this one, only comments. So
okay, very good. So my comment would be that what I think would make this okay with me would be if you're able to find, and again, I would imagine that 4 broad categories and maybe even fewer, you find, average profit margin for restaurants, average profit margin for retail, average profit for, and just kind of find some pools and then make 3 separate items. Now, I'm speaking to you as somebody who provides professional services. I am now arguing to increase my taxes from what you're being proposed right now. I'm just letting you know that I'm arguing against my own interest, but I think that would be more equitable. Just to recognize that, some businesses have a lot higher or a lot lower profit margin than others, and this tax would be, again, for some it's going to be a significant percentage, and others it's going to be completely negligible. And that's kind of the definition of an equity. Well, one very tortured definition of equity. Anybody? So that would be my request or my comment, is that maybe it's possible, and there might be other cities doing this now that have that classification. And I would just say I am perfectly comfortable with self-reporting as we're doing now, number of employees. That doesn't bother me. Self-reporting gross receipts, self-reporting number of places, it's all the same as far as I'm concerned. So I'm not concerned about that. But I would like to see some consideration that some industries or some broad business categories make more money off of every dollar than others do. Member Hansford.
My comment would be, I'd also like to just, see in comparison where we end up with regards to comparisons to other cities and what their fees are as well, to see if we are still staying in line and not, potentially driving our businesses to other areas that may be cheaper for them to do business in. So I'd like to, point out that just to kind of get an idea across the board.
Member Moss?
Yeah, I'm presuming that when this came before council, their staff report had a much more detailed look at what was going on in surrounding cities, particular cities close to Albany's size, in the East Bay or Bay Area in general. And the question out of that is when staff was looking at other cities, were there any that had a much more different, more equitable system that you thought could work in Albany that council rejected or didn't like particularly?
So the staff report to council from April 18th was provided as attachment 1, and it's in a paragraph. It's not like a chart or anything. The business license rate structures across the Bay Area are so different. El Cerrito still does full-time equivalent employees. Alameda, Berkeley, Richmond, and Hercules have tax on gross receipts, but they do different a different tax rate depending on the type of business. Berkeley does a different tax rate depending on the type of business, and some of those are also tiered. The taxes range from anywhere from 0.075% on like grocery stores to 1.395% depending on the industry. I think that was the cannabis industry. So it's very different city to city.
Were those other cities, did any of them seem like they would have been more popular in Albany, but you just don't have the staff to do them? I mean, Berkeley might have a more complicated system based on gross receipts, it's tiered, et cetera, but it wouldn't apply. It wouldn't be able to do it in Albany because you don't have enough staff to proceed. Right.
Berkeley has about 80 finance staff, if I remember correctly, and we have 7. So that's a very different staffing level. It's really down to staffing that, and administratively what we can apply. I think across the board, Member Moss, like you've been saying, where different industries could potentially have different rates. I know that was expressed at the council level, and again, it was just back to administratively, can we apply it this way, and how easy would it be for us to audit it? Who determines what business is in what tier or what structure? All of that kind of thing. It would be a lot more work, both on the front end and on the back end, to come up with those definitions, to make sure that it was clear for the taxpayer, not just the voter, but the person actually paying the tax. And also so that it's easy to administer on the back end. We went for as simple as possible, really.
I mean, I understand that, and I am sympathetic. I certainly understand that we're a labor-starved city, but I want to push back a little bit. We're talking about, we have a nice little chart here with gross receipts, this. I'm just asking for 3 more. And one is set up with different percentages for restaurants. One is set up for these categories. The business license records already have a business classification on them. It would take some work, but I'll bet there's some models out there that you could follow that would map business license classifications onto these categories. And then you have your 3 or 4 charts. We're self-reporting. They check off what type of business they are and their gross income and do the calculation. It's right there. So as far as asking, now auditing would be a little more complicated, but is it really going to be much more complicated than looking up their business license and seeing what their classification is, matching that and see if they paid the same amount? I'm not sure. So I'm not sure it has to be. I'm probably showing my ignorance of what's required, but it has to be that much more complicated than what we have now. How do you audit now? Like you say, you can't audit it now. So what's the difference? Yeah.
I have a question here. Do any, some cities in Alameda County do not have their own police or fire services. They rely on county services. Are there any cities, not particularly in Alameda County, but anywhere in the state, that rely on either private contractors or county agencies to do their permitting process or do that, some part of that process that you're aware of?
Yes, there are companies that we could contract out with. I know previously we've looked into that, and knowing that we were trying to bring the a new tax to the ballot, we waited to really dig into that further until our tax was a little less complicated, so that when we, if we did decide that we were going to contract it out, it would be something that was also easy for them to bring the cost down, because that obviously will have a cost to it.
Well, I'm sure it would, but could we have a more, complex or more specialized kind of tax system if we were dependent upon a large accounting agency or whoever that does this kind of thing, that could have more staff to put into looking at tax records or whatever.
Again, I'm sure we could. It would just cost more money to administer that type of thing.
Go ahead, Member Hanserman.
I was just wondering, it seems like it wouldn't be necessarily that we would have to, I understand the more work and the fact that we, are struggling with the amount of staff to put this forward, but I would assume, because this wouldn't be something that would need to be ongoing, that this would just be kind of a project type basis. Could some temporary employees perhaps be brought in to do these analysis? They wouldn't need to be brought in as full-time permanent staff, but to actually just have a temping agency provide, some accounting temps to work on something like this, so that we can get more information and not necessarily, hire out a separate agency or do anything along those lines that seem a little bit more drastic. But it seems like this would be a good opportunity to just hire some temps to get through this part of the process and make it more, because I don't want to give the excuse. I feel like I don't want to give the excuse like, oh, well, we're understaffed, and so therefore we're not really putting proper, proper time to this because we're understaffed and we just have to push this through. Because it's ultimately affecting a business, it's affecting somebody's bottom line, it's affecting somebody's livelihood. And I don't feel like we can really just use the excuse that we're understaffed when it's going to come down to somebody on the other end. I don't see that as being fair.
Okay. So did you have a specific question about temp help?
Yeah, are we able to, is the city able to just hire temps for this specific project to go through the tax returns and take a look at all of this so that we have more real data to go off?
We don't have access to tax returns. We have sales tax return information, but that was used in the model that we put together. The city does not have access to income tax returns at the moment.
Okay, well, maybe not the income tax returns, but I think when we were talking about reviewing kind of, the specific businesses and, gross tax, all of that, and saying that we didn't have an appropriate number of staff to really look at it. That was my question was, can we just hire some temporary staff to analyze more data around this?
I think there's some confusion going on here. I think that Member Moss was talking about processing the returns and have it basically auditing every one of them. I mean, basically confirming the amounts owed. Is that what you're asking, Pete? And that seemed prohibitively.
No, I mean,
I think you said there's 2,000 business licenses. How many people would it take to?
Yeah, well, if in fact if we went that route, but this idea of if we can make it too complicated because we don't have enough staff, and we have to keep this limited staff, but we use consultants in the city of Albany all the time. I mean, there's consultants on all sorts of capital improvement projects. There's consultants on many different programs, transportation programs, etc. Maybe that isn't what's generally done on a yearly basis as in finances, but it does seem like it could be. If it, again, it sort of has to pencil out as to whether it makes sense. Are we going to be getting more revenue, or are we just going to be giving it to consultants? I don't know, but it's certainly not a unknown idea in the way any city functions that you don't use private consultants or private agencies to do some part of the work.
And you're still talking about some sort of processing of the tax payments? Because I think Member Hans Romero was talking about getting solid data to make this decision.
Well,
is that correct?
Yeah. I mean, I was originally sort of going down that route, but what Jennifer's saying, it makes a certain amount of sense in order to get this a little more properly structured and what any changes we're going to be making. Because one thing I'm afraid of is if this doesn't really make sense to voters, it may not pass. I mean, I know Albany has this reputation, we'll pass any kind of tax or bond measure, and we're pretty good about it, especially on school taxes and things like that, but they don't always pass. And if businesses really didn't like this, or a lot of them felt this was unfair, it would be a pretty strong argument to say, this is going to penalize all these guys. How many people are now working at home in their back bedroom office doing consulting? I mean, there are many, many people. If you look at a Google map, it'll show all sorts of little businesses in all the neighborhoods. So it's going to be affecting them. And, if there was any kind of opposition to this, it would be a waste of putting it on the ballot. So I suppose, my suggestion would be, let's if we need more data, let's get more data, or let's make this make sense, and not just based on a lot of assumptions.
I think what I heard from Brennan is that our issue there is the ticking clock. But I'm wondering if maybe our proposal is, we need to slow down and take another look at this. We may have to miss this election, do it the next time. Is that where we want to go? The one thing I would say, and this is kind of a key point as far as equity and representation is concerned, I would argue most of the business, well, I don't know about the 2,000 business licenses, but most of the retail businesses you see on the street, their owners don't live in Albany. They don't vote in Albany. So their voice is through meetings like this and through actually, frankly, myself and Jennifer Hans Romero representing the merchants associations.
Well, but also
I think so my point is having some time for outreach so that they could have some say, so that you could get some feedback from them. It might be worthwhile. Yeah, it might be what we need.
Well, their voice will also be in the campaign literature drop that you're going to see on people's front steps. If a lot of businesses on Solano Avenue or elsewhere don't like this, money will be spent and their message will get out.
Fair enough. All right. I do want to say I appreciate the effort that's gone onto this, and I generally like this, and I think it's encouraging, but I just feel pretty strongly that the differences in profit margin are relevant here, and I would like to see that reflected somewhere. Any other kind of summations, final suggestions before we close this item with thanks to staff? All right, not seeing it. Thank you very much, Heather, and I think we can move on. Thank you.
Okay. Looks like we lost Chair Abbott. So I think in this case, we would normally move on to item 6-3. Member Hanson Romero, you're the vice chair. Oh, looks like we have a raised hand. Oh, there's Chair Abbott again. Let me promote him to panelist. Did I accidentally bring you down to attendee trying to send Heather down?
Yeah, you were trying to send me a message is what you were doing. Yeah,
no, I was not. Apologize.
It was very unnerving.
I was getting worried I was going to have to take over, Todd.
These panelists, these participant things, they move so much. So I think when I was trying to click on Heather's, you moved into the spot. No message sent.
Yeah,
apologies.
Whatever. Okay, whatever. All right, moving on to Item 6.3, Economic Development Committee's representative for the Albany Creative Justice Project panel. That'd be a non-member attendee. So to coordinate between the organizations and to have their input. Brennan, would you like to introduce this item?
Yeah, so basically I'm just going to give you a little bit of information on it. So this is for the Albany Creative Justice Art Project. This project will lead to the creation of a new public artwork that will actively engage residents of Albany in creatively addressing past, present, and future issues of social justice in the city and region. As noted in the agenda, the Albany Arts Committee have appointed a selection panel to assist with the public art review process for this project. One member from each of the following advisory bodies will comprise a portion of this panel as non-voting members. That's the Economic Development Committee, Arts Committee, and Social and Economic Justice Commission. This panel discussion will take place as a publicly held meeting on a date to be determined. Prior to this meeting, the selected EDC panelists must review the 12 applications submitted and should prepare with their notes on the applications and potentially like their ranking as well. And just to let you know as well, Member Green had expressed interest in being an EDC panelist if nominated. But so with that, I think if anyone is eager to be a panelist on this, to voice your opinion.
Okay, any questions for Brennan before we take nominations? Member hand, other than what is creative justice art?
Yeah, well, that was my question. What is creative justice? Is that kind of a vigilante style to it?
Yeah, you know, I don't have too much information outside of what I just gave you. But it basically is to try and address the social justice issues that we face in the past and present and future. Yep.
I think it refers more to the art project than the justice part of it, but it's kind of an awkwardly put title.
Yeah, maybe the panelists will decide.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean the memo we received talks kind of about the process rather than a definition, and that's I assume. Right. Very good. Any other questions before we open for public comment? Member Hans Romero.
Yeah, so I am still confused about the whole, like, what the driving for, basically what this all is going to result in.
Well, basically the idea is that the art inspires people in some way, but mostly for us, the Arts Committee has approved this plan to have a panel and with like the EDC to have a member participate on the panel to provide opinions on this art project.
And are they art projects in specific locations, or are these art projects that are being proposed?
So, yeah, the information I have is basically that there's 12 applications that have been submitted, and it'll be up to the panelists to review the applications and see what is most fitting for this project.
So what we're doing now is we're helping place an EDC member to have a little voice in the selection of which of those 12 applications could become art, public art in Albany.
Mm-hmm. And this would be part of a larger panel.
And I think it's wonderful that they've opened the door for the EDC to have representation there. Member Mott.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't exactly written into the staff report, but it also occurred to me, of all the places that the Arts Commission thinks would be a good placement for art, almost all of them, except for maybe Memorial Park, are in commercial parts of Albany. So I'm, kind of reading between the lines, perhaps, maybe it would be helpful to have somebody that has some link to the business community through the EDC, help, push some of those spots along, because you're not going to get it on somebody's store unless you can convince them that this is a good thing.
Okay. Any other questions? Member Carlton, is that
I just had a question in one of the documents that was sent out was saying that they were hoping that the collaboration with the EDC would result in quicker results to implement this. And I assume then that they would have somebody from the EDC on the panel who then will report to us, and that no report or no sort of recommendation from the EDC would go to the Arts Committee.
Yeah, well, this would be a separate This would be a separate panel, and basically it's to provide input on the applications received. So this would sort of be a little bit separate from the EDC in that sense of I mean, they're non-voting members. They're more just to provide their input from an economic development perspective.
Okay.
Member Hanson Romero?
And I agree with you. You know, it would be.
Good.
I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, you know, depending on where these locations would be placed, and you know, getting an understanding, or again, this is where I bring in kind of public notice too, just to make sure that these are locations where they're not going to impact negatively certain businesses or block certain views, or, you know, have those kind of parameters set forth around, you know, how is this going to be, you know, proposed to the business district itself as well.
Yeah. So not sure exactly on that. I'll have to get back to you. But what I can confirm is so the locations are all different based on the submission. So there's 12 different submissions with different locations in mind. So.
Because you know, one of the things that comes to my mind is, you know, the School of the Blind, who uses our streets and sidewalks as kind of their training ground and stuff. And all of a sudden, if an installation were to be put, and maybe perhaps it would block a signage of somebody's store front, or signage, or you know, it could have several different impacts, or ADA compliant impacts. I just want to make sure that these locations would be properly examined first, and made sure that they wouldn't be doing more of a detriment than, you know, I'm all for the art, not trying to dissuade that at all. I'd love to have some more art in the commercial district as well. And I know that that's been a driving force, but I just want to make sure that it's not going to negatively impact someone else.
Well, then maybe you need to volunteer.
So, and just to clarify, the submissions have already, I mean, there have been 12 submissions. The locations are in those submissions. So that could be a part of the discussion.
Right, that would be part of the discussion. Any other questions, and we'll open up for public comment? Not anticipating public comment, but we'll open just in case. And hands are remaining steadfastly down, so we can bring for discussion, or even we can consider a nomination.
Well, I would certainly consider nominating committee member Green, since she already volunteered for this. And, you know, I think if you're into it already, she should do it.
Yeah, I think it's a good fit. Yeah. Do we second the nomination, or just nominate and then vote? I think we just nominate and vote.
That sounds good.
Anybody else want to throw their hat in? Okay. Oh, Member Hanson Romero, yes.
I was working with her on kind of the project, working with the Arts Committee. So I think I can communicate with her offline, and that we can have some dialogue back and forth. But I don't see myself having the time really to take this on. So I'd appreciate her thoughts towards it.
And I imagine that should there be something that she would like feedback from the committee, she could kind of bring it to the committee if it comes to that. I'm not sure what the timeline is, but yeah. Member Carlton, did you have something to add?
I was just going to say, I agree. I think that she's, you know, if she expressed interest and she was on the arts or the subcommittee, and I'm kind of the same way. I think it sounds interesting, but I just don't see that I have time to put forth.
And also just to clarify too. So the EDC member on the panel can bring the EDC's concerns to the panel as well. And will be an outreach period once the art is selected.
Excellent. Excellent. Very good. Thank you, Brennan. All right. We have a nomination. I think we can have a vote. Please.
Committee member Carlton?
Yes.
Committee member Hanson Romero?
Yes.
Committee member Moss?
Yes.
Chair Abbott?
That's a yes for me. Okay. Very good. So we again have the subcommittee report on art and commercial districts, and member Green is not here to present it. Do we just want to hold off on that, or member Hans Romero, did you have any input on that, or?
Yeah, I think we just want to hold off until she's back. Yeah.
All right, fair enough. I think that's the end of our agenda. Any other subcommittees wanted to speak in? I know we used to have a subcommittee of one, but he's not a subcommittee anymore. I know that.
Nope.
Member Carlton?
I just have a question because I know that we had the subcommittee to promote hiring, and there was a survey that went out. My question was just, did the survey go out, and when are results expected back and compiled for that?
The survey is still being conducted. The submission window will end on July 15, and we'll be able to provide more information on those results. And
Thank you.
I'll provide the information directly to you, Member Carlton and Chair Abbott, just based on
Very good.
The submission results.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Member Hans Romero, I see your hand up.
So I just wanted to say, and then going forward for next month, I believe everybody's on break, as it would be August, and just to
Yeah, I noticed the agenda says the next meeting is July 7th, but that would be challenging. We'd have to go back.
Oh yeah, Member Carlton brought that up. It's been updated to September 1st.
Okay. Oh, I just have. Okay.
Yeah,
Very good.
Thank you, Member Carlton.
So closing item 6.4, any requests or suggestions for future agenda items? And not seeing any. I know that we'll start getting some subcommittee work going in. And again, we are dark in August, so next meeting will be the first Thursday of September. And Member Carlton.
I did have one question. It was a meeting or two ago that you had mentioned, or somebody mentioned on this committee, that meetings might resume in person in September.
Yeah, that's unclear at this point. Potential. I mean, it's hard to say at this point, but we'll have more clarity on that as it gets closer to the
Did
date.
you just say potential? Yeah, it's potential.
Oh, no, not intentionally.
Okay. Yeah, all right. I think it's kind of cool. All right.
You're
All right,
saving time.
We're gonna adjourn this meeting. Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Have
you.
a good
Thank
month.
you.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye.